Welcome back, everybody. Sorry I've been MIA the last few weeks, but I'm here. I hope all of you are healthy and happy. I got a few questions, and please send more questions in. All right, this is good. How can I join the Rusty team? That's a good question. I think it might be facetious, but usually we notice somebody before they approach us, whether it's a competitive surfer or if it's a free surfer. A lot of times guys that don't compete get our attention, and joining the Rusty team can mean a lot of things. It could mean a discount. You get a couple $100 off a board, or if you start to blow up on the internet and stuff, we might give you trade-ins, and if you really become a household name. Little pit bull. Yeah, you might even get some money, but I think most of the time guys are just pulling my leg. Okay. Is there any way to prove that a Rusty torsion is from the USA and not a copy shaped somewhere else pretending to be the original from you guys? Well, is there any way to prove that the torsion spring comes from us? You're just going to have to take our word for it. We're not like a lot of the other board builders out there. We don't really disclose where the boards are made. But the torsion spring is a product that we develop pretty much by ourselves. The foam is what's the main difference in a torsion spring. It's an extruded styrofoam. What we're all used to is expanded styrofoam, which is a bunch of real tiny hard beads that get put into a big block and heated up, and they expand and they fuse together. And since the surfboard industry has become so interested in EPS, there's companies that are making plugs, or what's we used to call the molds for the surfboard. So they look like a little bit bigger surfboard. So and it's with a smaller plug, closer to the finished shape, it's easier to get more consistency. Like the foam is the same all the way through, which is what you don't get with polyurethane foam. Polyurethane foam, you get the hardest foam on the outside, and as you get deeper into it, it gets softer. The EPS is pretty consistent, but what you can do is you can also control the pressure more readily with a smaller mold, and the fuse time, and you can get much better fuse than the block foam that we've been used to for so many years. The extruded styrofoam has been around in the building industry for a long time. It's usually been color-coded red or blue, depending on the company it comes from, and it's a waterproof foam that they use for construction. Somebody came to me from Peru, I forgot his name, about 20 years ago, and he said, "You got to try these blanks." And he goes, "But you have to vast them with epoxy." And they were kind of a light blue, and I went, okay. But they rode really well, and they held up really well. And then he said, "Well, you liked them, huh?" And I go, "Yeah, I loved them. They're great. How do we get more?" He goes, "Well, I have a container in Peru, but I can't afford to bring it up here." So I wasn't ready to become a business partner. So, But a few years later, Javier of XTR got a hold of a source for white, white extruded styrofoam, and he formed a company called XTR, and people ask me, well, oh man, the thing has holes in the deck. Is it defective or what? The deal is when the XTR, the XPS heats up, it off gases, and you can get, if you don't have the vents, you can get bubbles and delams on the deck of the board, especially. So I'm not sure who developed it. I think maybe Javier did. I think he's got a patent on it. But we work with Javier. Sometimes we have him glass our boards, and but most of the time we glass them ourselves. We like making them stringerless, and on the rails carbon is kind of the big buzz these days. I built my first board with carbon 40 years ago, 45 years ago. But what the torsion spring has is a blend of carbon and Kevlar. Kevlar is the material that they make, or they used to make, bulletproof vests out of. Carbon is kind of brittle. It's good against impact, but its shear strength isn't as good as it could be. Whereas the Kevlar takes the impact. It might dent a little bit, but its shear strength is far superior to the carbon. So we've got a blend of carbon and Kevlar on the rails, and we feel that controls the flex of the blank enough without having to put a stringer in it. And we have sourced a clear XPS, extruded polystyrene, overseas, and as it turns out, it's the same supplier that Javier gets his foam from. But I don't know what I can do to prove, but we, unlike a lot of other companies, do build every single torsion spring in our factory out Miramar Road here in San Diego. Why do I love to talk about volume. Why do you think volume is such a hot topic and misconception among those who don't understand it? I know I talk about volume every time, but it's a phenomena of the social media, and it's also a result of more and more people using computers to design their boards. The volume, 5 years ago, hardly anyone mentioned volume. 10 years ago, nobody did. Back decades ago, when I used to make a lot of the masters for Clark Foam, they'd always provide the volume, and I was going, how'd you get it? Did you calculate it mathematically? And he goes, no, we have a sink tank. We do it by displacement, which is arguably probably, unless you're a very tight mathematician, it's probably the best way to do it. But why has it become? It's because the internet's available to most everybody, and they can go online and they can go on all the different websites, and pretty much everybody has a volume calculator and their theories on how much volume you need. And the volume calculators are, as I say, they're a reference, but they're not gospel. And I do primarily customs these days, and I say there's a pyramid in everything really, where at the bottom of the pyramid you have the beginners, which could become experts someday. But the pyramid is full of people at the bottom. They're kind of beginners and novices, and they're the ones. Well, they're not the ones that are the most hung up on volume, but that's something they can pick up off the internet, and they really expect the volume to be what I never have anyone ask me about rocker. And okay, I can hit your volume, but what if I mess with your rocker? What if I gave you an extra 1/4 inch? You go, well, 1/4 inch isn't much. A 1/4 inch will have so much more impact at either end of your board, especially the tail, than a leader would on your board. But because all the companies out there, even if they don't, there's people that offer formulas for volume, and they'll rent it to you for $100 a month or something like that. But so back, average size surfers, 140 to 160 pounds. We got it down pretty good. If you're advanced, you're going to be this. If you're not so advanced, if you're intermediate beginner, or beginner. If you're a beginner, you're not going to be able to ride. If you're a 160-pound beginner, 150-pound beginner, say 150, you are going to need a lot more foam than Josh Kerr, who weighs 150 and change. Josh lived in the 25 zone liters, kind of mid to high 25 liters. If you're a beginner, the more foam you have, the better. And one of the issues I have is guys coming off of their 9-foot wave storms, and they want to get their first real board, but they think they can go from a 9-foot wave storm to a 6-foot Dwart or a 6-foot SD. You can't. Surfing's tough. I've taught a lot of professional athletes from other sports how to surf, and they're all, before our first session, they're talking it up and carrying on, and after about an hour, they got their asses whooped, and they come in and they go, "Damn, that was a lot harder than I thought it was going to be." Surfing is one of the hardest sports or lifestyles or arts to excel in, because every wave is different. The consistency of every swell is different, and then you have all the other people out there to compete with for waves. So, with that in mind, the newer you are in the game, the bigger the board I feel you should have, and you probably shouldn't take more than 6 inches at a time when you drop down. Come off your wave storm and get an 8.6, maybe an 8-foot, fiberglass foam surfboard. And it will help you make the transition easier. And if you do progress and you're ready for a shorter board, you can always keep the 8-footer or the 8.6 as a board for smaller days or for fun, or to mix it up. Because I think after you surf for a while, some people ride the same board every day. I was fortunate because I can make my own boards, but I was always trying new stuff, and I didn't. When I first started shaping, volume wasn't even a consideration. If you did about more than 6 or 10 measurements on the board, you're a professor. And back to volume again. I get a lot of guys that I had one yesterday. He's 5'10" and he's 220 pounds. And he wants a 6.0 and he wants it 30 liters. And I have all kinds of, because I do so many customs and I get a lot of the same questions. I have a lot of form short letters like I think you're going way too small. And I tried to explain to it. Wade Carmichael, who's our top rider, he's world class. He's a phenomenal power surfer. He weighs 190 pounds, and he rides, when he first started getting our boards, he was riding 29.5 to 30 liters, but he's up to 31 and a half liters now on a 6.0. He's 190 pounds, and this guy that he admits he's maybe intermediate, he can, but he can hold his own out there. Wanted a board with 1.5 liters less than Wade rides. I generally, if you're young, you're in shape, and you're surfing on a regular basis, every 10 pounds I go up about 1 liter, give or take. And my math says he should have had at least, if he was world class, he should have had 34, 35 liters. So I programmed, and he wanted it 20, not even 20 inches wide, I think, and 2 5/8. And I printed my form letter out very first thing on the email response to him. And I always have my customers' best interests in my mind. And so I told him, I go, I think you're way off the mark on your volume. And I proceeded to program him a 6.0, a 6.1. He asked for a 6.0. And I programmed him a 6.1 and a 6.2. Like, if somebody's not sure, rather than going back and forth via email or on the phone, it doesn't take me that long to, once I've got the board tightened up for the guy, if I can shrink it or grow it a little, it doesn't matter. It's not that time consuming. But I made him a 6.2 or 3 or something. And I made it 21 1/4 and 2 3/4. And it had 37 liters, which if he was a more advanced surfer, that would have been good for him, a 220. But he emailed me back and he goes, God, that seems huge. And I'm going to answer him tonight. I go, he said, well, how about if we split the numbers? And I'll do it. It's not that hard. But I want you all out there to know that the volumes that you get off the internet are just for reference. They are not gospel. And I think the most common mistake is surfers, even intermediate plus, I get a few advanced surfers, that they want boards with ridiculously low volumes. And I mean, in my mind, unless you're in the top 1% of the surfing population, and you think you have a pro career in front of you, I think the main reason we all surf is fun. And to me, the more waves I catch, the more fun I have. And it doesn't matter what size board I'm riding. But the social media, the volume charts, all the people are computer shaping these days. I know there's well over 200 machines out there, and probably 5 times that many people using the software, if not more. And you can get a civilian version of Shape 3D free off the internet. Shape 3D, it's the same software I use, but you get kind of a roots version, and you can play with it, and you can kind of see what we go through, shapers go through, and how it works. But if you're going to a shaper, I hope you're going to them because you trust the shapers, not necessarily me, but you've done your research, and the one thing I hate is when somebody comes to me and they go, well, I have this Brand X surfboard I love, can you copy it? And I go, well, if you love it, why don't you go back to Brand X Shaper and get a repeat? I can copy it, but I'm not that thrilled. I've got a lot of my own good designs, but Um, yeah. So, back to my original thought on that is trust your shaper. And if he thinks your volume is too low, or, if you're a more intermediate plus advanced surfer, once in a while I'll recommend a liter or two or several liters less. And, but, the main thing is, trust your shaper. Yeah, I was going to end it, but it's, people get fussy over 0.2 of a liter. And I'm drinking, this is a mug my partner got me. But anyways, this is about a half a liter. It's like not full. It's about 2/3 full. That is a half a liter. And you're telling me that you can feel the difference in half a liter? If you're one of the best surfers in the world, maybe. But your body weight, if you have, say you have 25 liters and you say you can feel a liter, so that's about 4%. And your body weight is 160, so roughly 5-6 pounds. I mean, your body fluctuates in 3, 4, 5, 6 pounds a day, from the lightest to the heaviest. Solid morning piss is maybe at least a half a liter. So yeah, the liter thing is so I'm kind of over it. But it's a good starting point. What are your thoughts on SUPers and foilers in the lineup? I think there's an issue about your capability of, how easy it is for you to catch a wave. It's like having a guy on an 11-foot surfboard out in the lineup. He doesn't have any manners. He catches waves like way outside of everyone, glides through the pack, cruises back out. The next good wave he sees, he takes off. And he takes off so far out that he's oblivious to the crowd inside that have been waiting half an hour for the wave. I used to SUP a lot. I haven't. I think I'm too old for hydrofoiling and whatnot, but I think it's cool, but I think you should be very respectful. If it's crowded, no, if it's relatively uncrowded and you have manners, you wait your turn, you nod the surfers. If a surfer wants a wave and he's in position, you nod him in. But, the foilers, especially the foilers, have such a wide range of conditions that they can ride in. They can ride waves that surfers can't ride, and suppers to a certain extent. Yeah, I mean any form of wave riding, or any form of fun that you get from the ocean. There always has to be respect, and I think the respect thing. It takes a while to learn it. When you first start off, a lot of times you're in front of somebody, but if you have respect for the other people in the water, okay. But with a sup or a foil board, you can ride waves that surfers can't. And I would, as I learned at I learned to sup at a fairly crowded beach break, and then as I got better, I wanted to be around people less and less. And on days when Blacks wasn't that crowded, I'd paddle down there from the shores and catch a few waves, and I'd sit in the very south peak, and way south of anyone else. Once in a while, a canyon set would come, and I'd pick it off, But or when I was on trips. Sometimes when I was surfing, I hate to sound smug or spoiled or whatever, but you're surfing a lot of good waves. Sometimes I'd mix it up, and if the crowd was really light, like 2 or 3, 4 people out, I'd take a sup out. But respect. Just you gotta have respect for the other surfers in the water. Really, no matter what craft you're riding, you gotta have respect. Do you guys make discs? I assume that disc you're meaning like a short double ender. Yeah, we make discs. I've told this story many times, but early in my shaping career, I shaped for GNS in the early 70s, and I got to know Skip Fry, and I shaped next to him, and I was curious to try some of his boards because I was really more about Dick Brewer or Mike Hinson, but I wanted to try the up rail thing and double ender thing, and so yeah, I've been making egg type boards for almost 50 years. But in the last 15 or more like 20 years, I have made several models that I think qualify as a disc. The Happy Shovel, the Muffin Top. It'll come to me. But we've had about 4 or 5, like boards that are designed to be ridden sub 6, and they're pretty full at both ends. And you go on our website, and, it's pretty obvious what a disc or a disc-like board looks like. And I personally used to ride. Those were my shortest boards. They have a lot of area, and volume isn't everything on paddle. Your surface area has a lot to do with stability in paddle too. This is a good question, and I've been getting a lot of these on the online orders. How do you think being what is a good model for an older surfer that still wants to carve, but it is not a fish? I'm older, and I'm bigger, so I have a big guy category on our website, and 25 years ago I came up with a desert island. I was surfing the Cove one day, and I realized I didn't really have the right board. Cove's an interesting wave. The takeoff's kind of steep, and it kind of wanders a little bit, but once you're in, it's kind of a big mush burger. It's a powerful mush burger, but it's a big mush burger. And so this is like a swell in 83 or something. It's like I get out, maybe 93 or something. 93. And I got out of the water, and I went back to shaping room, and I shaped what I called the Desert Island board. I think the name might have even come from Dave Parminter. But it was designed to be a board you could ride in anything. It wouldn't necessarily excel in any conditions, but you could ride it. If you had a one-board quiver and you're traveling, you take the Desert Island with you. But the Big Cat, it's on our list on our website. That was the first ones were mine, and like I said, I'm a big guy, and now I'm older. But they're designed as a hot dog board for a big guy. We had a model called the Catfish years ago, and it was a semi-fishy, not full fishy, but like a 14 and a half max nose, and 15 and a half, 16-inch tail, but it was a double-winged swallow that we called the Catfish. And it was pretty popular. And so I made the Big Cat. I think my first one was 7.6 or something. But it was kind of like my hot dog board. And it became pretty popular because there was a lot of older, bigger surfers. And since then, we've The Zeppelin is kind of a cruiser board, a big board for bigger, older guys. That's gotten a lot of play lately. The Big Cat's enjoying a big comeback. The Yeti is a board that I specifically designed as a step-up board for a bigger guy, older guy. And there's several of our models that, like the smoothie, I made 9-foot smoothies. The first one was for a good friend of mine, Stephanie, I don't know, 12 years ago, 10 years ago, and it was about 6'4", 6'5", and the smoothie originally was a piranha, and she loved piranhas, but she wanted to try something different, so I just took the wings off and gave it a round tail, and she loved it. And there was another model by another shaper out there. His boards are made in Asia. But his model was pretty popular. I think he got Board of the Year or something. And I went, this thing's a no-brainer. It's nothing new. And so then I made this apple. I made the smoothie. But, the success of his board encouraged me to pursue the smoothie. And it's really been a top-selling model. Because it offers some degree of performance, but it's also smooth turning board, does clean, smooth turns. So it's foam. It's just foam. I can make something that's normally 6 foot long, 9 foot long if you really want it. But yeah, we've got a few dedicated models for older surfers that want to still carve. And once again, don't forget, I make completely custom boards. They say, well, I like the Zeppelin, but I'd like a bit more tail rocker, and I'd like the tail pulled in maybe a ½ inch, and pretty soon it stops looking like a Zeppelin and it looks like something else. And as long as you have a clear idea of where you want to go, you can give me the starting point off the internet that say this isn't somebody wanted to order a Terminator, an older design, and I had to custom build that too to look like a Terminator, but it was, in my opinion, much improved. How much do you think being based out of San Diego has influenced your shaping? Well, sure. In the early days, my realm was small, and my parents moved to Hawaii in the 70s, so I started to get some Hawaii experience, and I got exposed to Hawaii shapers. And in 74, I did my first Australia trip, and I got exposed to all the Australian designs. And as time went by, I traveled, not as much as a pro surfer, but I traveled a fair bit. And, and that was long before the internet, really. So I was always keen to have a look at other shapers' boards. And, I remember when I was working at GNS at the shop on PB Drive in the early 70s. And a fellow came in, he was 71 or 2, and he'd just come back from a trip to Australia. And he had this board. Boards are just starting to get kind of shorter in the U.S. here. They had been for a while, but this is like a 7-foot board. It was kind of racy, like almost a step-up board, but it had a completely flat deck, and it had a lot of rocker, and it had angular rails, and I'd never seen anything like it. And so, I tried and shaped a few, and I really liked them, the way they felt. So, being based out of San Diego, we've got some pretty good waves here. I've think blacks is one of the better waves. And I was fortunate enough to surf it back in the day when there's 4 or 5 guys out, on one of those perfect October Santa Ana days. But my source of inspiration before I really got to travel was the magazines, and I was always interested in what guys were building outside of San Diego. And I live here because I used to love the place, but it's kind of fucking crowded lately. Not lately, it's been getting more crowded and crowded. But I still love it here, and I plan to keep shaping out of San Diego till the day I drop. Would you recommend the Shiv or the Sister Brother for small to decent East Coast waves? They're both. I'm partial to flatter decks, and I think once people ride a flat deck surfboard, they trip, because if I had 2 boards that were the same length and the same width, and I had one with a crown deck and I had one with a flat deck, the flat deck board would have to be about a quarter inch thinner to have the same volume, like maybe 0.22 thinner to have the same volume. So you're closer, your center of gravity is lower. If you can imagine riding a 1-inch thick surfboard, how close you would feel to the water and how much flex you would get out of the board. That's why I always tell people, if you have a question, first try to answer it yourself. And if you have a question, then you take your question to an extreme. Like, gosh, what would a flat deck board feel like compared to a crown deck board? And, you take that to an extreme, and you can kind of answer your own questions, like, well, gee, I don't know whether to get it 19 inches wide or 24 inches wide. That's an extreme, but that's what I use to give people an example of how to answer their own questions. But I did Aki's 84. I did a 100 board promotional gig. I think it's been 6 or 7 or 8 years now, and we only did 100, and they sold out in like one day. Some people hung them on the walls, other people rode them, and they tripped because the original Aki models had a little bit lower tail rocker. When it was Al American Rusty battling it out with Curran and Aki, his boards had a lot of rocker. They had pretty crown decks, and my boards had less rocker and flat decks, or flatter decks. And for a while there, I really had a pretty big following. And so fast-forwarding into the Aki model, the release, and then it did so well a couple years later, we released the Blade, which was kind of Aki's model, except without a beak, and that's been pretty popular. And so it was actually, my Australian people that said, "Gee, we ought to do a few more." And I said, "Sure." So the Shiv is the SD. It's the SD bottom. It's the SD outline maybe pulled in a little bit in the last third. But it's the flat deck version of the SD, and that actually hasn't been as popular as the Hatchet, which is a semi-fish, 14.5, 15-inch nose, swallowtail, flat deck, or so we got the Shiv, we got the Blade, we got the Hatchet. And we got a couple of others. So I always sort of like to move forward on my boards. And the Sister Brother's been around for a while. If you haven't had one, it rides similar to a lot of performance short boards, but the Sister Brother is a totally different feel. You get a board that's a quarter inch thinner, and you feel the closeness to the water, your leverage, your balance, your flex, but they get up on top of the water very quickly. They paddle faster, and it takes a few sessions to adjust. But if the rails are done right, they engage quickly, but they release quickly. A lot of times the crown deck boards, if your volume isn't right, or your rails are too thin or too thick. If they're too thin, they go in the water too deep, and you kind of bog in your turns. If they're too thick, you can't get them in the water. Flat deck boards they have a similar issue, but if you get the volume approximately right, and you take a few sessions to adjust, most people, I made a guy an 8-foot flat deck smoothie, and now he's ordered like 3 more, as backups. So I can put a flat deck on any model, and I from time to time I do. So my suggestion is, hang on a second. The shiv, the 419 fish, the hatchet, the blade, those are the like the 4 main, and those are the 4 main flat deck boards. For you small to decent East Coast waves, I think a lot of surfers tend to be self-conscious about what they carry under their arms. They want to look cool, and they want to have a narrow, thin board. And most of the year here in the United States, I know the East Coast gets great waves, but more often than not, even here on the West Coast, we're surfing smaller, junkier, maybe not even decent waves. I guess decent maybe, but I'd recommend the hatchet. It's just as I said before, it's not just the volume that's key to the board, but it's also the surface area. And sometimes if somebody's ordering a board that's a little too volume and they insist on their dimensions, I won't tell them, but I'll make the nose a ½ inch wider. And I've only been caught once, I think. But I'd say for I'd say, heck, try the hatchet. It's a board that's been received modestly. I mean, honestly, the 419 fish has been very popular, but I think the hatchet's a good one. Demos, upcoming demos. How can I demo a board? In the last couple of years, we've shifted to primarily online business, where we deal, directly from business to customer, and it's difficult. We used to carry a demo fleet for years, back when the shops were cool. Most of the shops aren't cool these days. They want boards on consignment, and when they sell the board, they lose the invoice, or they just want to take forever to pay. There's some good shops out there. I mean, Huntington Surface Board is an example, and they're starting to come back online. And if they order 8 boards, I'll say, well, hey, let me build you a couple demos. I'll give them to you, way below wholesale. And so we don't really have demos at the factory. There's a few shops that are coming back on board that, aren't that interested in overseas boards, and, they recognize, quality home-built boards. Not home, but made here in America. That's not to say that there's a lot of great board builders around the world. I mean, even some of the Asian board builders are decent craftsmen. Designers know. I mean, people used to ask me, they go, well, who's the best shaper? Who do you think the best shapers are? And I go, well, it's, you have craftsmen out there. There's guys that can make a board look good, but they don't really understand the fine details. And there's a lot of great shapers out there that are good craftsmen. There's a lot of kind of, hacky guys that are actually great designers. And, the boards might look a little bit rough, but they ride good because they're good surfers and they understand what, all the nuances. So as more and more shops realize how bad they screwed up by insisting on getting consignment boards, and the only way you can really do consignment boards is if they're built overseas, because they only cost $250, and the maker and the shop owner get to share in the profits. As the shops come back online and they realize that I'm old, I can see whatever I want, but they're going to realize that they're fucking up the industry too. And one thing that's come out of the COVID is I think the Asian import thing has slowed down a little bit, and people realize that, hey, I can buy anything based on my fingertips in the computer. I think there's certain brands, and once again, I think they're Asian-made boards that can afford to have demo fleets in the van and go around shop to shop. And like I said, there's a handful of shops starting to come back on board. And if we design you a custom board and you're really, really unhappy with the performance, which happens rarely, we'll build you another board. We'll give you a break on it, but we don't like people to abuse that opportunity. What kind of waves are channels best for? Well, there's all kinds of channels. The very first channels that I remember were, I believe, Cole Smith, an Australian shaper, started making them in the 76, 77 or something like that, maybe 75, 76. And there are 6 deep channels, 6 long deep channels, but I think they're primarily are designed for Indonesian waves like Padang or Uluwatu, and usually they have very light wind conditions and very long hollow waves. And I made my first channel bottom, I think around 77, 78, and it was a double wing swallow with a little bit wider than normal tail, but 6 deep channels, and I kind of freaked on how good it worked. The channel bottoms have issues. The deep channel bottoms, especially the longer, deeper channels, they're great when the conditions are smooth, and they're great when it's lined up and hollow. But on the flip side, they track a little bit, and when the wave surface starts to get a little bit jumbled up, they get kind of wobbly, or the stability of the board is affected a little bit because of the water surface. But when the tri-fins first came out, there's a lot of experimentation with different types of belly channels. Like the most popular, I think, were the 4 shallow belly channels. What it's referring to is the underside of the board where your belly is, I guess. But they started generally just behind the wide point and died out in front of the fins, and there was 4 of them. And the thinking is to free the bottom up a little bit from rail to rail, and give it a little bit extra squirt. and those 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 have really pretty much disappeared. I mean, I see a few around. I get asked to make them occasionally, but the channels these days are, you know, you still see some 6 channels or 4 of the channels are deep, and then maybe the channel off down the center of the board, like offset, like if it's a swallowtail or a square tail or something. The channels that are closest to the stringer, those a lot of times zero out because they add too much grip or too much drive, or they make the board too tracky. And so that center channel, especially on 6, where the outside, the 4 outside channels are deeper, and the center one's pretty shallow. They're fairly I mean, they're not popular, but people get them. But the most popular ones seem to be the 4 deep channels, and they're not as long as they used to be. They're not quite as deep as they used to be, but it does add some grip or hold in your turns, and I personally think if a board's designed right and it's the right width and thickness and everything for the surfer, I kind of don't think you need them, but they're, on the flip side, there's always the rack appeal of the board, how it looks when it's, if you've never had one and you walk in the store and you see one, you kind of trip on it and you go, wow, how's that riding? The guy behind the counter. So we offer the blade. We offer one version is a concave board with a pretty deep concave most of the way through the board. It's deepest about a third. That's what I call a sweet spot, somewhere in that back third. The blade 4 channel, which has got a moderate bottom rail to rail. Blade concave, the deepest part of the concave is anything over a 1/4 inch concave side, and the blade concave is almost 0.28. And then the blade channel bottom, concave is like 0.08 in the middle, and then it shallows out to a very, very shallow V, and we put the channels in by hand, and so that, once again, it's foam. I could do that on any model. Like if you like the SD, you like everything about the SD, but you didn't want the concave as deep and you wanted maybe 4 channels off the tail, I'd have to modify it. The channels kind of had more curve through the bottom of the trough, so I generally flatten the tail out just a little bit, lengthwise and laterally, because you get, with the channels, you get a little bit of lateral break too. Back in the day when deep channels first started coming out, I made a 10 deep channel egg for a friend. He loved it. The sander hated me. I didn't really enjoy shaping 10 deep channels, but it was fun. It was, maybe I did another 4 or 5, but, and then there's, I'm blanking on his name now too. There's a guy in Australia that does these, I forget what he calls them, but give me a minute here. Starting to run out of time. sorry, this is taking longer than I thought it was going to take. There we go. His name's Earl Peterson. He's an older Australian. I think.
No, turn around.
Oh, just turn the camera around. There. Now, those are some crazy channels. The video's pretty cool, the music's pretty cool. But anyways, just about out of time. And I think I got my technical problems sorted out. And you guys stay healthy.